You've been telling the truth your whole life, and someone who lied got further than you. That's not a coincidence, that's a pattern, and Machiavelli saw it 500 years ago. Think about the last time you were fully honest. You told them exactly how you felt. You shared what you were really thinking. You laid everything out, no filter, no strategy, because you believed that honesty was strength, that authenticity would be respected, that the truth would protect you. And it didn't. Someone used what you said against you. Someone adjusted their position once they knew yours. Someone stored your honesty and deployed it at the worst possible moment, quietly, surgically, in a room you weren't in. You didn't get burned because you were weak. You got burned because you were unarmed. You walked into a game that has invisible rules, and no one told you the first rule. Never be fully honest. Not with everyone, not in every room, not before you understand the terrain. Niccolo Machiavelli wrote this in chapter 18 of The Prince, one of the most dangerous, most banned, and most secretly studied chapters in the history of Western thought. He called it Concerning the Way in Which Princes Should Keep Faith. But this wasn't just for princes. It was for anyone who has ever watched a lesser person win because they understood something about honesty that you were never taught. By the end of this video, you will understand why full honesty, deployed without strategy, is one of the most dangerous things you can do. You will learn what Machiavelli called the art of controlled truth, and why the most powerful people in history practiced it not as deception, but as survival. You will walk away with 8 principles from The Prince that apply tonight, in your conversations, in your relationships, in every room where something real is at stake. Stay until the end. The final section contains the most uncomfortable truth in this entire series, and it's the one that will change how you speak for the rest of your life. Subscribe. Turn on notifications. Let's begin. This is episode 6 of the Dark Wisdom series on Victory Loop. If you haven't started from the beginning, this series starts with episode 1, You're Being Used, Machiavelli Knew the Cure. Each video builds on the one before it. This channel is for you. Missing one is like walking into a movie at the third act. You can follow it, but you'll feel the gaps. In episode 5, we talked about why good men keep losing. We exposed the myth that goodness alone is a strategy. We showed you that the world doesn't reward virtue, it rewards awareness. Episode 6 is the next layer down. Because once you understand that the world doesn't grade you on your character, you are left with a question no one around you is ready to answer out loud. Then what do I do with my honesty? That question lives underneath every conversation where you said too much, every meeting where you revealed your position before you understood theirs, every relationship where your openness was taken and used and you didn't see it until it was already gone. Machiavelli's answer to that question is precise, it is uncomfortable, and it has been misquoted, misunderstood, and deliberately kept from the people who need it most for over 500 years. Here is what this video covers. We are going to break down the actual meaning of chapter 18 of The Prince, what Machiavelli really said, stripped of the distortion. We are going to tell the story of Pope Alexander VI, one of the greatest strategic communicators in the history of power, and what his example reveals about how information actually moves. We are going to examine the moment every honest person eventually faces, the room where their truth became their enemy. We are going to draw the line, precise and clear, between honesty as a virtue and honesty as a liability. And we are going to close with 8 rules that every person in this audience can use starting tomorrow in the most ordinary situations of their lives. This video is not teaching you to lie, it is teaching you something harder, something more disciplined, something Machiavelli considered the highest form of intelligence: how to tell the truth strategically. Let's go. Part 1. The honest person in a dishonest room. I want to tell you something that happened in Florence in the year 1494. A man named Girolamo Savonarola stood up and told the complete truth. He was a monk, a preacher, a man of absolute conviction and zero calculation. He told the people of Florence exactly what he believed about corruption, about the church, about the Medici family, about God's coming judgment. He held nothing back. He spoke from a place of pure, burning honesty. He was magnetic. Crowds of thousands came to hear him. He became one of the most famous men in Italy. For 4 years, he ran Florence. And then they burned him alive in the city square. His complete, unfiltered honesty, the very thing that made him powerful, became the exact instrument of his destruction. He told too much to too many. He made powerful enemies with no strategic protection. He named the corrupt without first ensuring that naming them wouldn't kill him. He was honest in a room full of people who were not. And in that room, his truth was not a shield, it was a target. Now, let me ask you something. Have you ever told the truth in a room and then watched the room use it against you? Have you ever shared your real plan with someone and then watched them move against it? Have you ever been honest with your feelings with a person who stored those feelings and deployed them in an argument months later? Have you ever told someone what you were struggling with and then watched them use that struggle to position themselves above you? You were honest, they were strategic, and in that specific moment, strategy won. This is not a story about good versus evil. It is a story about awareness versus naivety. And Machiavelli's entire point, the one no one wants to hear, is that the honest person in a dishonest room is not noble. They are just exposed. Here is the mechanism behind this, and it is so simple that once you see it, you will see it everywhere. When you speak the truth, full, unfiltered, unstrategic truth, you give the other person information. You give them your position, you give them your fears, you give them the precise coordinates of where you are, emotionally, strategically, personally. And in any situation where the other person is thinking about their position as well as yours, that information is power. Your openness has given them something, and in return, you have received nothing, except the feeling of having been authentic. That feeling, in those rooms, costs you. Machiavelli described this with a clarity that no one who came after him has matched. He wrote, "Men are so simple and so subject to present necessities that he who seeks to deceive will always find someone who will allow themselves to be deceived." Not because people are foolish, because honesty, in people raised to believe it is virtue, becomes a habit, a reflex, an automatic behavior that happens without asking whether this specific room with these specific people at this specific moment deserves the full truth. And automatic behavior is exploitable behavior. The person who tells the full truth automatically is predictable. The person who is predictable is manageable. The person who is manageable in Machiavelli's world and in yours rarely holds real position for long. This is not pessimism, it is engineering. It is the kind of clarity that allows you to stop being surprised by what keeps happening to you, to stop calling it bad luck, to start calling it what it actually is, a pattern. And patterns, once you see them, can be changed. But first, you have to be willing to look at the room you're in and ask the question that honest people are trained never to ask. Does this room deserve my truth? Subscribe. Don't forget to turn on your notifications, and before part 2, drop one word in the comments: exposed.
If you've ever been burned by your own honesty, let me know you're here. The prince speaks. The great majority of mankind is satisfied with appearances as though they were realities, and are often more influenced by the things that seem than by the things that are. The world responds to what it sees, not to what is true. This is not a cynical observation. It is the most practical thing Machiavelli ever wrote, and the people who refuse to hear it keep losing to the people who already have.
Part 2. What Machiavelli actually warned. Before Part 2 begins, I need to draw a line, because what you're about to hear will be distorted in your mind by every value system you were raised with into something simpler and more dangerous than what it actually is. Machiavelli was not telling you to lie. He was telling you something much harder. He was telling you to think before you speak, before you open, before you hand the room information it hasn't earned. That difference matters enormously, and if you miss it, this entire series becomes a license for behavior that it was never designed to support. Chapter 18 of The Prince opens with a statement that sounds almost agreeable. Machiavelli writes, "Everyone admits how praiseworthy it is for a prince to keep his word and to behave with integrity rather than cunning." He agrees. He says it himself. Honesty is praiseworthy. Integrity is admirable. And then the pivot that caused monarchs to read this in secret while burning it in public. Nevertheless, our experience has been that those princes who have done great things have considered keeping their word of little account, and have known how to beguile men by shrewdness and cunning. In the end, these princes have overcome those who have relied on keeping their word. Not in theory, in practice, in history. The ones who mastered the strategic use of truth, the ones who understood when full transparency served them and when it destroyed them, they outlasted and outmaneuvered the ones who were simply, consistently, automatically honest. He is not celebrating this, he is documenting it, as he always did, not with the world he wished existed, but with the world that was actually operating. And then he made the observation that no one before him had committed to paper with such brutal clarity. A wise ruler cannot and should not keep his word when doing so is to his disadvantage, and when the reasons that led him to promise to do so no longer apply. Here is what this means in the actual world you inhabit, not in the world of medieval Italian politics, in yours. Have you ever made a commitment to a relationship, to a plan, to a course of action that you held to long after the circumstances that created the commitment had completely changed? Have you ever stayed loyal to a position you had already outgrown because you said you would, because you didn't want to appear inconsistent, because you were afraid of how it would look to change? While the world moved, while circumstances shifted, while the original reasons for the promise ceased to exist. And you held the commitment, not because it was still right, because you said it. Because honesty meant keeping your word regardless of context. Machiavelli would say, that is not honesty. That is rigidity dressed as virtue. And rigidity in a world that is always moving is another name for vulnerability. The strategic thinker is not less honest than the automatic one. They are more honest in a more difficult, more disciplined way. They ask, is this still true? Is this still right? Does this still serve the purpose for which it was made? And if the answer is no, they say so, directly, without shame. That is not deception. That is the courage to face changed reality instead of hiding behind an outdated promise. Now, the second layer of Chapter 18.
the layer that gets quoted most and understood least. Machiavelli writes that a prince must appear to have qualities that may serve him: honesty, mercy, integrity, whether or not he always enacts them. He says, "It is not necessary for a prince to have all the good qualities I have enumerated, but it is very necessary to appear to have them." Again, before the distortion takes hold, hear what he is actually saying. He is not saying, pretend to be something you are not. He is saying, the image you project in a room carries weight independent of your internal reality. And the person who projects confusion, vulnerability, desperation, or inconstancy, even if they are internally strong, will be treated as the image they project, not as the reality behind it. This is the principle behind every high-stakes conversation you've ever walked into underprepared. You knew your own competence, you knew your own strength, but the room didn't see it, because the image you carried into that room didn't communicate it, and the room responded to what it saw. Machiavelli is not asking you to be fake. He is asking you to be precise, to understand that what you project is a choice, and that choice carries consequences you will live inside of, whether you made it intentionally or by default. In part 3, I'm going to tell you about a man who never once in his life told the full truth to the full room, and who, by that discipline, built one of the most complete, lasting legacies of power in the entire history of the Catholic Church. His name was Alexander VI, and what he taught Machiavelli about honesty will change how you think about every conversation you walk into from this point forward. Subscribe, notifications on, and in the comments, drop "I see the game." Let me know this is landing. The Prince speaks. It is unnecessary for a prince to have all the good qualities I have enumerated, but it is very necessary to appear to have them. And I shall dare to say this also, that to have them and always to observe them is injurious, and to appear to have them is useful. The appearance of a quality often works as effectively as the quality itself, and sometimes more so. This is not deception. This is the architecture of influence. Master the architecture.
Part 3. Alexander VI, the master of controlled truth. Part 3 is the story of the most strategically dishonest man Machiavelli ever studied, and also, in Machiavelli's precise analysis, one of the most effective leaders the Catholic Church ever produced. This is a story about information, about what you reveal, what you withhold, and what happens when you master the space between them. His name was Rodrigo Borgia. He became Pope Alexander VI in 1492, the same year Columbus reached the Americas. He held the papacy until 1503, 11 years, in one of the most politically volatile, militarily dangerous, and institutionally corrupt periods in the history of the Catholic Church. He survived, more than survived, he thrived. He expanded papal territory, he elevated his family, he negotiated with kings, he outmaneuvered enemies who had more resources, more armies, and more claim to power than he did. And he did it through a single, central, devastating skill. He never told the full truth to any room. Not because he was a liar in the simple, undisciplined sense. A simple liar gets caught. A simple liar leaves inconsistencies. A simple liar eventually collapses under the weight of the contradictions they've created. Alexander was not a simple liar. He was a master of calibrated truth. He told each person, each ally, each enemy, each church official, each foreign king, exactly the portion of reality that served the interaction.
Not false information in most cases, simply incomplete information, strategically incomplete, precisely incomplete. He showed every person the version of himself that they needed to see in order to behave in the way he needed them to behave. To the Spanish monarchs, he projected piety and religious authority. To the French king, he projected flexibility and diplomatic openness. To his enemies within the church, he projected strength and the implied threat of what happened to people who moved against him. To the people of Rome, he projected the image of a holy, God-appointed leader whose power came from heaven itself. None of these images were entirely false, but none of them were entirely true. They were curated, intentional, deployed with the precision of a man who understood something that almost no one around him did. The room does not need your full truth. The room needs the portion of your truth that moves the interaction in the direction you require. Machiavelli described Alexander with something approaching professional admiration. He wrote, "Alexander VI never did anything else but deceive men. He thought of nothing else and found the occasion to do it. No man was ever more able to give assurances or affirmed things with stronger oaths, and no man observed them less. However, his deceptions always succeeded according to his wishes, because he knew this side of men's nature."
Read that again. Not the deception part, you've read that. The last sentence. Because he knew this side of men's nature. This is the key. This is what separates Machiavelli's teaching from simple cynicism. Alexander was not effective because he lied. He was effective because he understood human psychology deeply enough to know what each person in each room at each moment was hoping to hear. And he gave them exactly enough of it to maintain their loyalty, their compliance, or their fear. He was not guessing, he was reading. He was studying each room before he entered it and deploying his communication with the precision of a surgeon. Now, pull this completely out of the papal court. Bring it into your life. Every room you walk into has people who are hoping to hear something specific. Your employer hopes you'll communicate certainty and competence. Your negotiating partner hopes you'll reveal your bottom line before they reveal theirs. Your rival hopes you'll get emotional before they do. The person testing your boundaries hopes you'll explain yourself more than the boundary requires. They are all waiting to see what you reveal and how you reveal it, and when. The untrained person reveals immediately, reflexively, because honesty is their default, and no one taught them that default can be strategically deployed. They give up their position before they understand the room's position. They answer questions they weren't required to answer. They fill silences with information no one asked for. They over-explain when restraint would have served them far better. Alexander VI never filled silences he didn't choose to fill. He never answered questions he wasn't required to answer. He never revealed his complete position before he understood yours. This is not immoral. This is disciplined, and it is one of the most learnable skills that most people spend their entire lives never developing because they were taught that openness is virtue, and therefore that the opposite of openness must be vice. It isn't. The opposite of automatic openness is strategic awareness, and strategic awareness is what this entire series is built to develop in the people watching it. In part 4, I want to tell you the story of a conversation, a specific kind of conversation that every single person watching this video has had at least once. A conversation where they were fully honest and exactly the wrong thing happened. And I want to show you through that story the precise moment where the outcome could have been different. Subscribe, notifications on, and in the comments, drop the words strategic silence. I want to see who understood what part 3 was really about. The prince speaks. The one who adapts his policy to the times prospers, and likewise that the one whose policy clashes with the demands of the times does not. The room changes. The moment changes. The one who has only one way of communicating, full openness, all the time, every room, will eventually find themselves in a moment that openness alone cannot navigate. Adaptability is not dishonesty. It is the highest form of intelligence. Part 4. The moment your honesty cost you. Part 4 is personal, and it will be uncomfortable, because I'm going to describe a pattern that exists in every ambitious person's history. A moment, maybe more than one, where you were completely honest, completely real, completely you, and that honesty was the thing that cost you the most. This is where the theory becomes your life. Let me walk you through the pattern. You were in a room, a meeting, a conversation, a relationship dynamic where something real was at stake, a promotion, a negotiation, a decision about your future, a moment of confrontation with someone who held leverage over something you cared about, and you told the truth. Maybe you told them how much you wanted it, and they used that information to offer you less than you deserved because they knew you would take it. Maybe you told them what you were afraid of, and they exploited that fear to keep you compliant. Maybe you told them what you thought of the situation, and they used your honesty to position themselves as the reasonable one while making you look unstable. Maybe you told them you were struggling, and they filed that away and deployed it in a conversation 3 months later when they needed to diminish you. You were honest, and it cost you. And the hardest part, the part that no one talks about, is that you didn't lose because you were wrong. You lost because you were unarmed. You brought the full truth into a room that was playing a different game, and the rules of that game penalized openness and rewarded precision. Machiavelli identified this vulnerability with a term that translates into English as something close to the error of the transparent man. The person who, by virtue of being fully visible, gives their opponent everything they need to defeat them. And here is the thing about the transparent man. He is usually also the most decent person in the room. He is usually the most genuine, the most fair, the most committed to real outcomes over political ones, the most worthy of whatever he is seeking. And yet, in the room where strategy is operating, his decency becomes his disadvantage. This is the cruelest irony in Machiavelli's writing. Not that evil people win and good people lose, but that good people, by operating on a set of assumptions about how honesty functions, assumptions that were given to them by people who also believe those assumptions, walk into rooms where those assumptions do not apply, and they keep being surprised by the result. The prescription is not to become less good, it is to become less automatic. There is a specific habit that costs almost every honest person in high-stakes situations. Machiavelli would call it answering the question that wasn't asked. When someone puts you in a difficult position, when the conversation turns towards something where your real answer would expose your vulnerability, the untrained person answers the question fully, honestly, automatically. They tell you their salary expectation before you've established the value of what they're offering. They tell you their fear before you've told them anything. They explain their reasoning when a simple, firm response would have served them better. They justify themselves to rooms that never asked for justification, but will absolutely store it and use it once they have it. Restraint is not dishonesty. Restraint is the refusal to give the room information it hasn't earned. The refusal to fill silence because silence makes you uncomfortable. The refusal to over-explain because explanation is more socially comfortable than a measured, confident pause. Machiavelli wrote, "He who seeks to deceive will always find someone who will allow themselves to be deceived." He was describing the opponent's opportunity, but read from the other side, it says something else entirely. The person who is always ready to be fully honest,
who will open completely because they were raised to believe that's the right thing to do. They are the person Machiavelli is describing, not as a villain, as a gap. A gap that someone more strategic will eventually fill. Stop filling rooms that haven't earned your truth. Stop answering questions that weren't asked. Stop justifying decisions that require no justification. Stop offering your position before you understand theirs. These are not acts of deception. They are acts of discipline. And discipline, quiet, specific, practiced discipline, is the beginning of real strategic power. This is what Machiavelli was trying to give the people he believed could use it. Not the powerful, they already knew this. The aspiring, the intelligent, the ones who kept losing in rooms they deserved to win. He was writing it down so that someone, someday, 500 years later, in a completely different world, would finally read it and stop being surprised. Subscribe, notifications on. And in the comments, drop this: I answered when I should have been silent. This one is for every time the room got more than it deserved. The prince speaks. The wise man does at once what the fool does finally. Not eventually, not when the pressure builds, not after the moment has passed. Now. The skill of knowing when to speak and when to hold, that is not a strategy you develop under pressure. It is a habit you build in the quiet, ordinary moments before the high-stakes ones arrive. Build it now.
Part 5. The 4 Rooms. Part 5 is the framework, the practical architecture, the difference between theory and the tool. Because Machiavelli never intended his writing to remain abstract. He was a practitioner, a diplomat, a military strategist, a man who had operated in the most high-stakes communication environments of his era. Every principle he wrote was drawn from observation of real behavior in real rooms. So, here is the framework that lives underneath Chapter 18, the 4 rooms, and what each one requires from you. Room 1, the trust room. This is the room where genuine, tested, verified loyalty exists. A relationship, personal or professional, where the other party has demonstrated over time that your truth is safe with them, where openness is reciprocal, where what you reveal is used to deepen the relationship, not to gain advantage over you. In this room, Machiavelli would not ask you to be restrained. Here, honesty is not only safe, it is essential, because the relationship is built on it. The moment you become strategic and withholding in a trust room, you corrupt the thing that makes it valuable. The error most people make is they apply trust room behavior to every room. They speak in every room as if it has earned the openness that only a trust room has earned. They bring their full inner world into spaces that have not built the capacity to hold it safely. Test the room. Trust is earned. It is not assumed. Room 2, the negotiation room. This is the room where something real is at stake between 2 or more parties, each of whom has interests they are defending. A job offer, a business deal, a conflict resolution, a conversation where the outcome will affect something material in your life. In this room, full transparency is almost always a strategic loss, not because honesty is wrong, but because revealing your full position before you understand theirs removes your leverage. Every skilled negotiator knows this. You gather information before you deploy it. You ask before you answer. You understand the room's priorities before you share yours. Machiavelli's principle here, in the negotiation room, speak precisely, not completely. Say exactly what the moment requires, not more. Silence is a tool. Restraint is a position.
The pause before you answer in a negotiation room is not awkward hesitation, it is the controlled deployment of presence. Room 3, the performance room. This is the room where your image is being formed, a first impression, a presentation, a meeting with someone whose opinion of you will shape what doors open and which ones close, a social environment where reputation is being established. In this room, the question is not what is true. The question is, what story does this room need to see in order to form the impression that accurately represents what I am capable of? That is not deception. That is the understanding that image is a strategic asset. Ferdinand of Aragon, whom Machiavelli held up as the clearest example of strategic image management, projected piety, stability, and religious purpose. Not because he was purely those things, because those projections gave his decisions a narrative that the people around him could follow. Your projections in the performance room are the story the room tells about you when you leave. You are the author of that story. Most people author it accidentally. The strategic thinker authors it with intention. Room 4. The hostile room.
This is the room with someone who is not aligned with your interests, who has leverage or who is trying to build it, who is testing you, who is, in some cases, operating against you without announcing it. In this room, full honesty is not just strategically costly, it can be genuinely dangerous. And yet this is precisely the room where the reflex of honest, open, unguarded communication is most likely to activate in people who were raised to be transparent. Because the hostile room often looks like the trust room, it presents warmth, it invites openness, it asks questions that feel like genuine curiosity but function like intelligence gathering. Machiavelli spent 14 years operating in rooms exactly like this, rooms where the most dangerous person was the one who appeared the most friendly, where the smile was the opening move of a strategy, where the hand extended was connected to a mind already calculating. His survival and his eventual influence came from one skill above all others in this room. He read the room before he answered in it. He did not enter and immediately speak his truth. He entered and observed. He mapped the interests. He identified who stood where. He noticed the silences as carefully as the words. He calibrated his response to what the room required, not to what he instinctively wanted to say. And then, when he spoke, every word was chosen, not scripted, chosen. There is a difference. Scripted is performance, mastery is mastery. These 4 rooms are not rigid categories, they shift. A trust room can become a hostile room if trust is broken. A negotiation room can become a trust room if mutual respect is built over time. The skill is reading which room you are in before you decide how much of yourself to bring into it. Most people operate with one mode, full openness always or full guardedness always. Both extremes fail. Full openness always, you are exploited in every room that isn't safe, and you don't even know which rooms are safe. Full guardedness always, you cannot build genuine relationships, genuine trust, genuine connection, because nothing of you is ever actually present. The master communicator, the one Machiavelli was describing without ever quite saying it in these words, operates differently in every room. Not because they are fake, because they are awake. They are present enough to read the room they are in, strategic enough to calibrate their response to what the moment actually requires. This is the discipline, this is the practice, and it is available to everyone watching this video, starting with the very next conversation you walk into. Subscribe and turn notifications on. And in the comments, which of the 4 rooms do you struggle with most? Trust room, negotiation room, performance room, or hostile room? Drop it below. The Prince speaks. It is not titles that honor men, but men that honor titles. And it is not rooms that define you, it is what you choose to bring into them. The man who knows what he carries and chooses when to set it down does not walk into rooms, he enters them.
Part 6. What the fox knows that the lion doesn't. We came back to the animals. We always come back to the animals, because Machiavelli returned to them in chapter 18 for a specific reason, a reason that connects directly to the question of honesty in a way that almost no one who quotes this metaphor ever fully explains. Part 6 is that explanation, and it will reframe everything you've heard in this video. In chapter 18, Machiavelli writes, a prince must know how to use both the beast and the man. Of the beasts, he must choose the fox and the lion. We covered the lion and the fox in episode 5. The lion represents force, the fox represents cunning. One drives through obstacles, the other navigates around them. But here, in the honesty chapter, the fox plays a specific role that goes beyond general strategy. The fox, Machiavelli says, recognizes traps, not just avoids them, recognizes them before stepping in them from a distance by reading the terrain rather than simply moving through it. And here is the precise connection to honesty that every commentator somehow misses. A trap, in the context of human communication, is not always a lie someone tells you. Sometimes, often, a trap is a room that invites your full truth and then uses it against you. Have you ever been in a conversation where someone asked you how you really felt and you told them, and then that feeling was used as evidence of your instability, your weakness, or your unsuitability for something you wanted? Have you ever been in a meeting where you were encouraged to share your full plan, and then the parts of that plan that were still developing, still fragile, still growing, were used to dismiss the whole? Have you ever opened honestly to someone who responded with warmth, and then watched that warmth disappear the moment you were no longer useful to them, and by then they had everything you'd told them? Those were traps, set not with malice in every case, sometimes with genuine curiosity that simply lacked the discipline to protect what it was given, but traps nonetheless. The fox sees them from a distance before entering.
And how does the fox see them? Not by becoming suspicious of everyone, not by becoming paranoid or guarded in every room. The fox sees them by being a careful observer of the terrain before they become a participant in it. In human terms, the fox listens before they speak. The fox asks questions before they answer them. The fox spends the first moments of any high-stakes interaction studying the room. Who is here? What do they want? What are they actually asking? What will they do with what I give them before committing to a response? The lion walks in and takes a position, immediately, loudly, with all the confidence of a creature that has never had to think about traps. The fox, however, pauses at the threshold, not because it is weak, because it is awake. And in chapter 18, Machiavelli makes his most precise observation about honesty, buried in a sentence that most readers skip past because it sounds like everything else in the chapter. Those who have known best how to imitate the fox have come off best. Not the lion, the fox. In the chapter about honesty, about keeping faith, about what to reveal and what to withhold, the animal that wins is not the one with the most force. It is the one that reads the room before entering it. Now apply this to the conversation you are about to have, the meeting, the negotiation, the difficult exchange that is sitting in your near future, the room that has something real at stake. You do not need to lie. You do not need to perform. You do not need to be something you are not. You need to do one thing,
One specific, learnable, practicable thing that most honest people never do. Read the room before you answer in it. Ask what the other person is actually seeking. Ask what they will do with your answer. Ask whether the response they are hoping for serves you or only them. Ask whether the question they asked is the real question, or the question designed to get you to answer the real question that they didn't ask. These are not acts of manipulation. These are acts of intelligence, of the specific, precise fox-level intelligence that Machiavelli considered the highest form of practical wisdom. The honest man who reads rooms before answering in them is not less honest than the one who answers every question automatically. He is more responsible with his honesty. He gives it where it serves the truth. He withholds it where it would only serve the person holding the trap. That man is not a liar. He is the fox that the lion wishes it had been before it stepped in the thing it never saw coming. Subscribe. Notifications on. In the comments, drop this: the fox. One word if you're choosing the animal that survives. The prince speaks. A prince who is not wise himself will never take good advice. Men who are not corrupted by excessive good fortune or excessive bad fortune are rare, and since exceptions cannot be used to make a rule, we must accept this as given. Read the people around you as precisely as you read the situation. The trap is never just the situation. It is always partly the person who set it. And the person reveals themselves if you are watching before you are speaking.
Part 7. The Controlled Truth. There is a principle that lives at the center of everything Machiavelli wrote about honesty. A principle so precise that once you understand it, you will never again confuse strategy with deception. He called it, across several chapters in several different forms, the principle of the controlled truth. And part 7 is where I want to name it clearly, because this is the thing everything else in this video has been building toward. The controlled truth is not a lie. It is not a performance. It is not a mask. It is the deliberate, conscious choice of which truth out of all the truths available to you serves the moment you are in. At any given point in any meaningful conversation, you possess multiple truths. You have truths about how you feel, truths about what you want, truths about what you know that the other person doesn't, truths about your position, your capacity, your history, your plans. The automatic person deploys all of these truths indiscriminately, in whatever order they occur to them. They call this honesty. They call it authenticity. They call it being real. What they are actually doing is handing the room a complete map. A map of everything they have and everything they need and everything they fear losing, and then being confused when the room uses that map. The controlled truth is the deliberate, conscious choice of which truths belong in this moment, in this room, with this specific person or people. Not all truths, the relevant ones, the useful ones, the ones that move the interaction towards something that serves you and whoever you are in genuine relationship with. This is not dishonesty. It is editorial restraint applied to the most powerful tool you have, your words. Machiavelli understood this because he practiced it. For 14 years as the secretary of Florence, he sat in rooms with the most powerful, most manipulative, most strategically sophisticated people in European history. He wrote their conversations down afterward. He analyzed what they revealed. He mapped what they withheld. He studied who won and who lost at the end of every meeting, and he noticed again and again that the person who controlled their truth controlled the room. He is not the only one who saw this. The ancient Romans had a concept, arcana imperii, the secret of rule. The idea that power maintains itself in part through strategic opacity, not through deception, but through the deliberate refusal to make oneself entirely readable to those whose interests do not align with yours.
The same principle runs through Sun Tzu's Art of War. Be extremely subtle, even to the point of formlessness. Be extremely mysterious, even to the point of soundlessness. Thereby, you can be the director of the opponent's fate. Not through lies, through the disciplined management of what you make visible. And it runs through every high-functioning relationship, every effective leader, every person who has ever held real influence for a sustained period of time. They were not dishonest with the people they led, but they were not fully transparent with every room they entered. They calibrated, they read, they chose.
Now, here is the practical application, the one you can use in the most ordinary conversation tomorrow morning. Before you answer a question that matters, pause. 1 breath, 2 seconds. In those 2 seconds, ask yourself 3 things. First, does this person need my full answer, or do they need the relevant part of it? Second, what will they do with what I am about to tell them? Third, is this the moment for this truth? Or is there a better moment, a better context, a better recipient for this specific piece of information? Those 3 questions, asked silently in 2 seconds before every significant response, will change the quality of your communication more than almost anything else you can practice. Not because they make you a strategist at the expense of your integrity, but because they make you a thinker at the threshold of every room. A person who does not simply speak, but speaks with the intelligence of someone who has already considered what their words will do once they leave. That is the controlled truth. That is what Machiavelli was teaching, and that is what every person in this audience who has ever been burned by their own honesty was missing in the exact moment they needed it most. In Part 8, we go to the 8 rules, drawn from Chapter 18 and the surrounding framework of the Prince. Specific, applicable, real. Subscribe, and don't forget to turn notifications on. Drop in the comments, "I choose my words." 3 words for every time you're going to use this principle from here forward. The Prince speaks. It is better to be impetuous than cautious, for fortune is a woman, and if you wish to keep her under, it is necessary to beat and ill-use her. Not in the literal sense, but hear the deeper meaning. Do not be passive in your own life. The person who waits for the perfect, safe, fully transparent moment to act waits forever. The controlled truth is not timid, it is precise, and precision, deployed boldly, is the language of the people who shape what happens next.
Part 8. The price of total transparency. Before we get to the 8 rules, there is one more thing that needs to be said. One thing that comfortable conversations about strategy and honesty almost always avoid: the real cost. Not the cost of being strategic, the cost of being totally transparent in every room. And that cost is not just personal, it is architectural. It shapes what is possible for you. There is a concept that appears in the later chapters of The Prince, one that Machiavelli doesn't label with a single word, but builds across several chapters. The concept of the open fortress. A fortress with no walls, a stronghold with all its gates open, a defense with no interior. The open fortress sounds on the surface like hospitality, like trust, like the absence of ego and the presence of radical transparency. And in some traditions, spiritual traditions, therapeutic traditions, certain kinds of intimacy, that openness is the point, the goal, the ideal. But in Machiavelli's world, and in the parts of your world that operate on similar principles, which is more of it than is comfortable to admit, the open fortress is simply a place that is easy to take. The person who is totally transparent in every room, with every person at every moment, has no interior, no private space, no reserves that are not already visible to whoever is watching. And the person who can see all of you, who knows your fears, your wants, your insecurities, your plans at every stage of development, has a map, a complete map of everything that can be used. You are not a fortress without walls because you are brave or open or honest. You are simply undefended. And in a world where not everyone who approaches you has your best interest in mind, undefended is another word for available to be taken. This does not mean you should trust no one. We said this in part 5. Full guardedness is as costly as full openness, in different ways. The person who trusts no one builds nothing. They hold their interior so tightly that nothing real ever enters or leaves, and they spend their life in a kind of strategic paralysis, suspicious of every movement, unable to form the genuine connections that are the only thing that makes any of this worth pursuing. The point, the precise, specific Machiavellian point, is know who has earned the interior. Know which rooms deserve the full picture. Know which relationships have built enough trust that openness serves the relationship rather than endangering it. And know which rooms have not earned that. Know which people, however warm, however friendly, however present they appear, are operating in ways that are primarily self-interested. Not because people are evil, because people are human. And humans are, as Machiavelli observed with relentless accuracy, motivated by their own needs far more consistently than they are motivated by yours.
He wrote, "Men are driven by two principal impulses, either by love or by fear." And he noted carefully, clinically, that love is unstable. It depends on the person's state. It changes when their interests change. It can be present today and absent tomorrow without any dramatic event to explain the shift. Fear, in the respectful sense, not the terrorizing sense, is more durable. The person who understands that you have standards, limits, and the willingness to act when those limits are crossed, that person tends to stay within the appropriate boundaries of your relationship with more consistency than the person who is simply fond of you. And here is the uncomfortable implication that no one wants to say aloud. The most respected people you know are probably not the most transparent ones. They have presence, not because you know everything about them, but because there is something about them you have not yet seen. Their completeness is not available to you on demand. They give you what you need in the amounts the relationship has earned, and they hold the rest with a discipline that reads from the outside as quiet authority. That is not coldness, that is the architecture of sustained respect. The person who tells everyone everything, who is fully visible in every room, always available, always open, never strategic, is often liked. They are often warm and relatable and easy to be around, but they are rarely respected in the specific way that produces real outcomes. Because you cannot respect, in the deep, almost instinctive way, what you can fully predict, and you cannot fully respect what you can fully take. This is Machiavelli's final word on honesty. Not don't be honest, but don't be so open that you have given away the capacity to surprise, to hold, to protect, and to deploy your truth with the intelligence it deserves. Your truth has value. It is the most powerful thing you have. The question is never whether to give it. The question is who has earned it, when, and in what measure. That is the price of total transparency. It is not that it makes you dishonest, it is that in the rooms where it matters most, it makes you completely legible, completely predictable, completely available, and completely without fortress. Build the walls, not to keep people out, to decide who comes in. Subscribe, notifications on, and now the 8 rules. In the comments, building the walls. Drop it. The prince speaks.
A wise man ought always to follow the paths beaten by great men and to imitate those who have been supreme, so that if his ability does not equal theirs, at least it will savor of it. Not imitation for its own sake, but the deliberate study of the patterns that produce the results you are seeking. The people who mastered this principle of controlled truth, they left patterns, they left books, they left history. You are reading it right now.
Part 9. The 8 Rules. Machiavelli's Laws of Strategic Honesty. Chapter 18 of The Prince. The most discussed, most misread, most secretly applied chapter in 5 centuries of political philosophy. These 8 rules are what it was actually trying to teach. Rule 1. Speak to be understood, not to be complete. Every time you communicate, you are making a choice, whether you realize it or not, about how much of your inner world to expose. The trained person communicates for completion. They feel something and they say it. They know something and they share it. They want something and they express it. Entirely, immediately, without filtering. The trained person communicates for understanding. They ask, what does this person need to know in order for this interaction to serve its purpose? Not everything you know, not everything you feel. What serves the moment? This is not censorship of the self, it is responsible curation of the self. It is the difference between a mind that speaks and a mind that communicates. Rule 2. Never reveal your position before you understand theirs. This is the most immediately practical rule in the entire list. In every negotiation, every conflict, every job conversation, every significant exchange where outcomes are at stake, the person who reveals their position first has conceded the most valuable piece of strategic ground available. Before you say what you want, know what they need. Before you name your number, understand their constraints. Before you show your hand, read the table. One question before every significant answer. What is this person actually trying to achieve here? Answer that question first, then decide what of yourself to offer in service of or in response to what they need. Rule 3. The pause is a position. Silence, in most human interactions, is treated as absence, as weakness, as the gap where something should have been, and so people fill it, reflexively, compulsively, with words, with information, with explanation, with themselves. The trained person understands silence is a tool. A pause, held with composure, without apology, communicates something specific, that you are thinking, that you are not reactive, that your response is chosen, not reflexive, and that you do not need the room's approval badly enough to fill the silence before you're ready. Practice the pause, especially in rooms where you feel pressure to speak quickly, especially in moments where the automatic answer would give away more than the moment deserves. Rule 4. Your image is a strategic asset. Manage it with intention. Machiavelli was precise about this. The great mass of people will never see you as you really are. They will only see the image you project. That image, built through every interaction, every entrance, every response you have given in every room you have inhabited, is one of the most powerful things you manage. Most people manage it accidentally. They project whatever they feel, at whatever level of intensity they feel it, in whatever room happens to be present. They mistake spontaneity for authenticity and wonder why the room doesn't respond to who they actually are. Authenticity is real, and it belongs in rooms that have earned it. In the rooms that haven't, project the version of yourself that communicates what you are capable of. Not a performance, a calibrated, intentional signal. Rule 5. Promises are context-dependent. Honor them and update them honestly when context changes.
Machiavelli's most controversial principle, and the one most frequently misread as permission for simple dishonesty. It is not. A wise ruler cannot and should not keep his word when doing so is to his disadvantage and when the reasons that led him to promise to do so no longer apply. The operative phrase, when the reasons no longer apply, not when it becomes inconvenient, not when a better option appears, when the fundamental circumstances that made the commitment meaningful have genuinely changed. The person of real integrity does not hold to commitments blindly. They hold to the spirit of the commitment, the relationship, the purpose, the value it was designed to serve. And when circumstances change that spirit, they say so, directly, honestly, with the courage that real integrity requires. That is not breaking faith, that is the higher form of it. Rule 6. Flatterers are the most dangerous people in your inner circle. Machiavelli gave an entire chapter of The Prince to this warning. Men are so happily absorbed in their own affairs and indulge in such self-deception that it is difficult for them not to fall victim to this plague. The flatterer tells you what you want to hear. They make you feel seen, valued, confirmed in your existing beliefs. And in doing so, they insulate you from the feedback that would actually develop you. They are the most comfortable people in your orbit and the most corrosive. The person who tells you hard things with the intention of developing your capacity, that person is worth 100 flatterers, even when the hard things are uncomfortable, especially then. Distance yourself from people whose primary role in your life is to make you feel good about yourself and build your circle around people who make you better. Rule 7. Control the narrative after the action. The action is only half the communication. The story told about the action is the other half, and in almost every significant situation, the story that surrounds the outcome shapes how the outcome is perceived, remembered, and responded to. Cesare Borgia understood this. Those who have known best how to imitate the fox have come off best. The fox does not just act, it manages the aftermath of the action. It considers the story that will be told. It positions the narrative before the opposition can shape it. After any significant decision, any difficult action, any moment of real consequence, be the first to frame what happened, not to distort it, to ensure that the framing serves truth and serves your purpose. Because if you don't frame it, someone else will. Rule 8. Reserve your deepest truth for your deepest relationships. This is the rule that ties every other rule in this list together, and it is the rule that Machiavelli, for all his clinical precision, would have needed the people around him to understand most deeply. Not every room deserves your full truth. Not every person has earned your most vulnerable honesty. Not every conversation can hold the weight of who you actually are without compressing it, commodifying it, or weaponizing it. But some rooms do. Some people have. Some conversations are exactly the place where full truth, given freely, received completely, and held with genuine care is the most powerful thing you can bring. Know the difference. Not as a rule you follow mechanically, but as a practice you develop over time, through careful observation, through the building of genuine trust in specific relationships, and through the wisdom to know in any given moment where your truth belongs. This is not the end of honesty, it is the elevation of it. Honesty, deployed with strategy, given to the rooms and people that can hold it properly, that is the most powerful form of communication that exists. Not raw honesty, not automatic honesty, chosen honesty. Deliberate honesty, the honesty of a person who has thought carefully about what they are saying, who they are saying it to, and what they hope it will build. That is what Chapter 18 was always trying to teach, buried under 5 centuries of misquotation and distortion and deliberate suppression. And now you know it. 5 episodes in this series. Every single one has been building to a specific shift in how you see rooms, how you move through power, how you manage your own energy, presence, and communication. If this video landed, share it. Not with everyone, with the person in your life who keeps being burned by their own openness and doesn't understand why. Watch episode 5 if you haven't, Why Good Men Never Win, Machiavelli's darkest lesson. It is the diagnosis. This episode is the prescription. Together they form a complete picture. Everything else in the Dark Wisdom series is at Victory Loop TV. The full playlist is in the description. Subscribe and turn on notifications because every episode that follows goes deeper than the one before it. And leave one thing in the comments before you go, one thing from this video that you are carrying into the next conversation that matters to you. I will read it. See you in episode 7. Final reflection. Everyone sees what you appear to be. Few experience what you really are, and those few dare not oppose the opinion of the many. Niccolo Machiavelli, The Prince, Chapter 18. 500 years ago, still the most precise description of how human perception functions in rooms where power is at stake. You now know what the room sees. You now know what you choose to show it. That gap between what is seen and what is real is where everything Machiavelli ever wrote lives, and it is where your power now begins. That is the Victory Loop.